Spidey and his amazing friends represents every problem I have with modern preschool shows. The lack of creativity, boring characters, and animation that makes it look more like a 30-minute toy commercial than a TV show. It's not the worst show I've ever seen, it's even worse than that. It's nothing. It's not annoying, it's not funny, heck, I don't know if I would even call it educational. Season 1 was fine, cause at least it tried to teach kids some lessons, but by the second half of Season 2, the show had completely given up on teaching the kids anything. And when it does decide to have a lesson, it leads to some of the laziness writing I've ever seen. So today, we're gonna talk about the top 3 worst and best Spidey episodes. Why a top 3 instead of a top 5? Because there's not enough good episodes for a top 5. In fact, I was originally just gonna do a top 5 worst Spidey episodes video. But for the sake of variety, I decided to include the episodes that I did like. And for the bad episodes, I'm gonna talk about how I would fix them, just to give out some constructive criticism. With that being said, let's begin. I mentioned this episode in my Black Cat video a while back, so I'll keep this brief. This episode was really disappointing. I've always wanted to see an episode where Team Spidey and Black Cat work out their differences and team up, that's what the plot synopsis promised. But it takes 9 minutes for this team up to happen. Let me put that in perspective. It takes 9 minutes, in an 11-minute episode, for the plot synopsis to take effect. And even then, Black Cat just betrays them at the end, so what was the point of this? Now how would I fix this episode? Simple, just get rid of the stupid donating scene at the beginning. It's pointless, and it has nothing to do with the plot.
And you can't have that, kitty cat. But maybe you'd like to have this, kitty cat?
Oh, so it does affect the plot. At the very end, whoop-de-doo. And as for the ending, instead of having Black Cat betray Team Spidey, have her think about running away with the statue, but then she decides to give it back to the museum. So yeah, with a bit of better writing, this could have been a great episode. I know I shouldn't expect much from Spidey, but they are capable of writing good episodes. In fact, we're about to talk about one of them right now. You know, the weird thing about Spidey is that, not only are the heroes boring, but they somehow manage to make the villains boring as well. And I usually love villains in preschool shows. You can't take them seriously, but that's their whole charm. But in this show, the villains are so generic, and they all just feel the same. Except for Black Cat, of course, she's amazing. Now, the villains by themselves are pretty lame, but for some reason, when they work together, it makes for a really charming episode. And that's what leads us to Rhinoctopus. In this episode, Rhino and Doc Ock rob a bank and... Wait, they're robbing a bank. They're not stealing candy or taking toys from little kids. They're actually doing something that real-life criminals do. Huh, didn't see that coming. Anyways, while running away from Team Spidey, Doc Ock gets her tentacles stuck, which causes her to become a laughingstock. And instead of beating the crap out of the people who laughed at her, she decides to give up being a supervillain altogether. This leads to Rhino stealing her octopus suit and causing mayhem on the city. It's a simple, yet charming story. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but Spidey is somewhat relatable in this episode. Instead of being a perfect child like he always is, he actually feels like a real person with common flaws. And the episode has a pretty good moral on not letting your frustration take over you. This is Season 1, back when the show actually tried. So yeah, overall, pretty good episode. I mean, it's still Spidey, so it's not mind-blowing or anything. But it's still a step up from other episodes. I don't even know how to describe this episode. The title and the plot synopsis make it seem like it's gonna be something special. But instead, it just feels like any other Spidey episode. Because it is. This episode is nothing special. Today's bare-bones story is, Team Spidey and Iron Man throws a party for the friendly neighborhood. But, oh no, Zola steals all the party supplies. So the whole community has to work together to get them back. That actually sounds like a pretty cool idea, doesn't it? Normally in these episodes, the citizens are just there to panic when the villains cause mayhem. But here, they actually take part in helping the heroes. That sounds awesome, right? Well, guess what? That doesn't actually happen. Yeah, I'm not joking. This plot synopsis is a freaking joke. The only people who stop Zola are Team Spidey and Iron Man, that's it. As a matter of fact, the friendly neighborhood doesn't appear until the very end. And that's not even the worst part of the episode. It's the moral. Okay, the moral itself isn't bad. It's the way they execute it that made me wanna drink bleach. So basically the moral is,
You don't have to be from here to feel like you belong here. Whoever you are and whatever you do, you're part of the neighborhood. And this neighborhood is a part of you.
okay, that's not a bad message. Heck, that's actually a wonderful thing to teach kids. But here's the problem. This message comes right the frick out of nowhere. There was absolutely no build up to it whatsoever. And I don't know about you, but I despise it in TV shows and movies when the moral just pops up out of nowhere. It makes it seem very artificial and forced. The only plus is, the song at the end was pretty nice. Other than that, this is a terrible episode. And it's a perfect indication that the writers just gave up. How would I fix it? Oh, I don't know, maybe make the plot synopsis actually happen. And as for the message, well, maybe Zola stole the party because he felt left out or something, due to him being a robot. And at the end, maybe they invite him to their party so he can feel welcome. Sure, it would have been generic and stupid, but at least the moral would make sense. In a preschool show, the plot and the moral has to mix together properly, cause if it's not, you just end up with an incoherent mess. And that's exactly what this episode is. An incoherent and boring mess. Let's move on. Like the rest of the villains, Arnim Zola comes off as really dull and uninteresting. But this episode actually made me kinda like him. After Zola accidentally saves someone from a skateboarding accident, everyone suddenly starts to worship him. This leads to Zola deciding to become a superhero so he can get more fame. So he copies Iron Man's suit and becomes Iron Zola. He tries to do good things for people, but he just ends up annoying them. And at the end, he just gives up on being a hero and goes back to being a villain. Despite the predictable ending, this is still a very enjoyable episode. And it's refreshing to see a villain try to do something good for a change, even if he's just doing it for fame. And honestly, I kinda wanna see more of Iron Zola. I'm not asking for a redemption arc or anything, but maybe we could get an episode where another villain tries to be good, and maybe even get some help from Team Spidey. That would be fun. So overall, pretty decent episode. Well done, writers. Oh my god, never have I seen an episode of television that bored me as much as this episode. This episode gave me nothing to enjoy and nothing to say. At least the other episodes on this list gave me some things to point out. What can I even say about this episode? Little to nothing happens. Doc Ock makes a freeze ray to freeze people, Team Spidey chases her around, then she builds a giant freeze ray, the heroes stop it and the day is saved. Yay, the end. The only attempt at comedy in this episode is where a bird steals a man's churro. It would have been funny, but at that point, I just stopped caring. This is the most boring, long, tedious episode of Spidey I have ever seen. And that is saying a heck of a lot. As for how I would fix it, well, I don't know. How do you fix an episode like this? Nothing happens, so there's nothing to point out. Even a little kid would get bored of this episode. This is easily the worst episode of Spidey and his amazingly boring friends. I know it's a predictable choice, but darn it, I just love this episode too much to not put it on the list. Like seriously, who wrote this episode? Who wrote this character? Not the Spidey writers, that's for sure. So basically, Black Cat steals Iron Man's suit and uses it to cause chaos, and Spidey has to get it back. Don't get me wrong, the heroes are still bland as bread. But it's Black Cat that carries this episode. Sure, she faces little to no repercussions for what she did, but she showed that she can have remorse for her actions. She even saves a guy from being run over at the end. Would any of the other villains do that? Heck no. And that scene at the end.
And thanks to Black Cat.
Well, where is Black Cat? Hey, that's my car!
Sorry, it's just so shiny and pretty. I couldn't resist. Bye!
Holy crap. There is no way the normal writers wrote this episode. This will forever remain the best episode of this show. No questions asked. And that, my friends, concludes my list of the worst and best Spidey episodes. If I missed any episodes, feel free to let me know in the comments. And until next time, party on.